Hey everybody, welcome back to Pianist Academy and another live stream Masterclass, a Q&A. Welcome to everybody who's here already. I see we have Antonio, Thea, Becky, welcome. Welcome to the three of you. And I see we have a handful of other people here as well. So be sure and drop your name in the chat and where you're tuning in from. I know I love hearing all that, and I'm sure everybody else does too. So just a quick, hopefully there won't be any network issues today. Today is my first live stream with a new internet provider. So fingers crossed it all works out. So today we're starting with a bit of a masterclass segment for Antonio. Antonio sent in a video of himself playing Oil on Canvas. Dith, welcome Dith. Traverse City, awesome. Oil on Canvas. I'd never heard this song before, Antonio, so thanks for sending it in. Very interesting, short piece of music. So we're going to jump into that first and take a listen to Antonio's work. And after we finish talking about that piece and what he's working on, then we'll dive into the Q&A part of today. So without further ado, let's listen to Antonio playing Oil on Canvas. Antonio, can you drop in the chat also the composer of this piece? I can't remember that offhand, and it's not listed in the sheet music. So yeah, if you could do that, that would be helpful. All right, great work, Antonio. Let's give Antonio a little round of applause for another wonderful accomplishment, Antonio. You're cranking out some new music here. That's great. It was just a couple weeks ago we heard you play. Was it Misty last month? I can't remember. Yes, Becky says nice work. Absolutely. All right, so Antonio kindly sent over the sheet music for this. So we're going to take a look at that, and let's see where we jump into. Oh, thank you, Antonio. When I Fall in Love. Beautiful. Okay. All right. So I have a couple. Let's boil them down to general comments first, and then we'll dive into some specifics, Antonio. There's a lot of left-hand movement throughout the piece. So we have jumps from low, very low, to kind of a more normal position, or nearer to middle C for the left hand, right? I would encourage you, we're going to talk about the right hand and separately as well, but I encourage you to take hands separately for a little bit and really work on feeling both the octave and the chord that follows as working together and as being played instead of some of what I see you do is kind of play an octave and then we move and get ready to play and then we play again. Can we feel a little more joining of those motions together? so that the octave and the upper harmony not only are sounding consonant and they're sounding together and working together musically for us, but that we're feeling that as well. So we don't have to, it doesn't have to be something where, you know, we really work on, like in some of the other live streams and some of the videos I've talked about, working on keeping constant motion in the hand. We don't have to do something like that. That's for a different technique. But feeling where we're not kind of stuck in one place, and then we move and prep and then play something else. Because overall, and this is happening a little bit with the right hand too, it's hurting our sense of line and our sense of phrase. So the left hand is probably the most difficult because it's moving so far, right? So if we can really make sure we feel that throughout, whether it's those first octaves where we move from here. Sounds right? Yeah. Let me show the sheet music to everybody too while I'm at it. All right. Very interesting key we begin in. I don't actually know if I've ever played anything in D sharp minor. Usually you'd see E flat minor. So I would suggest, Antonio, if it's a little tricky, those first four measures that we have here, because of the key, and the key is so rarely played in. But if you can identify a little bit of the harmony so that we really know that we're playing, if you want to call it D sharp minor, and then we're playing an A minor 7. With the 9, yeah. We could just call it A minor 7. A sharp, sorry. And if we have some of those ideas in our mind also, that might help us make sure that we're getting our hand in the right place. We're not looking for a bunch of separate notes, right? We can continue that as we move on in the piece, and these chords get a little bit easier to read. Just A minor for 2 bars, and then we have a G major 7, and G, followed by a new key change, another key change, and F major for 2 bars, and then our C major 7. So when I look at these bars, I see those harmonies, and that informs how I'm thinking about what the hand positions feel like for all of these different chords. I know that a C7, C major 7, is going to feel nothing like an A sharp minor 7, right? Even though I don't play A sharp minor 7 all that often. Okay, so first things first, I've joined 2 topics together here, and one is feeling the movement in the left hand more fluidly, more as one, and also using any harmonic knowledge we can put in place. It could be, we could start as simply as saying, here's the root of the chord. I think all of these are in root position. So we have the root of the chord in the octave, and then we again, for almost all the chords, we play the root on the bottom of the triad. There's only a couple that are different than that in these 16 bars or so. So starting from the beginning, D sharp in the octave, D sharp is our lowest note on the bottom of the triad that follows. So any of those things we can join together, great. Because the next thing I'm going to ask you to do, Antonio, is to actually speed it up a little bit. And hopefully this other knowledge is going to make that easier. And start by simply counting. We're still working on left hand here, but hands separately, left hand alone. Can we make sure we count 1, 2, 3, 4? And keep this nice, with a bit more flow. And if we have separated the hands, we can really focus on feeling that sense of pulse, right? I just wanted to say hi for a second too. Is it, I'm not sure how to say that. Rex Desi. We're going to come back to your question in a second, Rex Desi, but welcome. And Jeff, welcome. Okay. Speed up so that we can feel this. Rhodesy, thanks. I'm sorry for that. But brilliant, thanks for sharing that. We wanted to feel this sense of pulse underneath everything. Right, Antonio? So we can start that. The whole left hand is just moving half notes back and forth and back and forth. So anytime we can feel bum, 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 bum. Okay, we're going to keep feeling that. That's some great stuff to work on the left hand. Now let's talk about the right hand. The theme of this is going to be similar. Here we go. Let's really make sure that we understand where the phrases are. We get a lot of little slur markings in this this piece of sheet music. But what the music doesn't actually show us is the real overarching movement of the phrase. So if we are now focusing on the right hand by itself, 1 and 2, 3, 4. I'm counting in 4 even though it's cut time. Oh, 1 and a 2. 1, 2. Whoops. Key change. So just continuing to focus on the pulse, right? And feeling where we would put breaths in, where we would breathe if we were singing this. I think we've talked about that before. In between our phrases, right? So if we do sing this. Right? And if we have that underlying understanding of the phrase and where the breath is, plus the pulse we just worked on with the left hand, the piece starts to make a lot more musical sense, right? It can feel a little disjointed if we're taking a really long time, if our tempo is too low, if we're not feeling the sense of pulse on the left, and we don't understand the shapes of each of these phrases, right? Okay. So there's a handful of things to get us started. Those are kind of musical things too. A lot of the stuff, I like what you're doing, and I especially like, Antonio, I think your fingering choice halfway through the piece. I'm pretty sure you play that starting with thumb and then crossing to thumb. Yeah, and that's a good choice. That's probably one of the most difficult bars to execute here. A technical thing I wanted to bring up. We have a lot of chords, left hand especially. Sometimes the right hand needs to play and align with what the left hand is doing. And we're running into a little bit of a problem where not all of our notes in one hand or both hands are sounding simultaneously. Let's see, Antonio, you said semi-legato with no connection. Great. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Let's see. So maybe a chord like what we have in our third bar. So we're third bar, we're looking at our low octave. Put these in yellow now. These two on our upper. I'm picking this one out because the shape of the chord on the keyboard isn't as easy to have all of the pitches sound simultaneously as when they're all, let's say, in the same plane, right? So before we had notes that were all black keys. Later in the piece we have notes that are all white keys. We're going to call those our two planes, let's say, right? We have in the keyboard and up, which are black keys, out of the keyboard and down, white keys. When they're mixed, those can be some of the most difficult to get all of the fingers to reach the key bottom simultaneously. So this comes back to having a really, really great bridge in our playing mechanism setup and making sure that we don't lose any energy in this part of the hand. Rhodesy says quite dissonant. It's very jazzy. Yeah. There's the right chord. So, yeah. It's got interesting harmonies for sure. So, having this bridge, right? And we've talked a couple times before, Antonio, about we have some exercises, or just we can, make sure that we put our fingers below the bridge just to make sure we've got a nice shape and that it's strong. When we play, you can start by just let's isolate a couple of the notes from the chord. Can we play the bottom two So here we have 5 and 3, one on one plane, one on the other. And can we play those together? After the octave, can 5 and 3 play together? If you find yourself articulating one of the notes in particular earlier and often, right? So let's say, I think the one that will usually happen earlier will be the black key. Because we're closer to it, the tendency is usually to have that one sound first, and then we fall into the lower note. Antonio, you said you did some rolled chords. That is just fine. Yeah, that's just a taste thing. That's fine. It's not a classical piece of music. We don't have to be super, super close to the score. But where you don't intend it to be rolled, let's make sure that they do sound together. So, in this particular case, where we have a G sharp and an E sharp, if you find that the G sharp sounds first all the time, like that, focus on playing from the 5th finger. Playing the finger that comes late, focus on that one, and let the finger that comes early follow. A lot of times, that simple shift in thought is going to fix our descent, as long as physically we're not losing energy in the wrong place. If our bridge is collapsing on 5, and that's why the hand is going down, but no sound is happening, or we're not putting enough energy in the key to make to produce a sound, that would be a different thing to work on, right? So if the bridge is good and it's strong, and we're not losing any energy there, focus on the finger that comes late and play that one out. Start with 2. So this is 5 and 3, 2 notes. Flip it to the other side of the chord. Now we have B sharp and A sharp. Figure out again which one comes early. This one could be either one, because the thumb tends to be a heavy finger that doesn't like to obey the rest of the hand. So if it's the thumb, we want to focus on 2. If it's 2, because 2 is on a black key and we're closer, and that happens, then focus on the thumb. So that'll depend on your practice. Now we have 4 notes in the chord. You can practice going back and forth between them. Then we put the chord together. Yeah. So listen back to your recording, Antonio, and I think you'll see where you'll be really picky, where there are chords that you don't want to rolled, or you didn't want rolled. Make sure that you dive into those and figure out why they didn't all articulate simultaneously. Yeah. Rotsi, yeah, you can send your own compositions in. There's a little link and in the description, there's a little line about how to send me your stuff. So if you go and check out the description below this video, the directions should be there. They're super simple. It's like one step. Okay, Antonio, let's talk about, let's see, we talked about phrase, we talked about pulse. Now we've talked about a little technique of having all of these notes line up. There was one other thing that I know I wanted to mention. Oh, maybe 2 things. One of them, I seem to have forgotten for the time being, but let's talk a little bit about your grace notes that you have in measure 12. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can put this in context for you. So there's measure 12. I am not incredibly familiar with this piece, so I don't know if the composer intends for the grace notes to be really kind of long for a grace note, like that, or if they're intended to be short. But I encourage you to be able to play them either way for musical reasons. And you might find for each of these, because we have a lot of minor seconds here, you might want to pedal each of the quarter notes as we go. So pedal, pedal, pedal. Or if the grace note comes on the beat, something like that. Yeah? So I wanted to bring that up. While I was talking, I remembered the other thing I wanted to say, and it's gone now. Give me just a second. Man, I don't know. Oh, I've got it. It's come back to me. Okay. Throughout this piece, there are a lot of places where as the left hand rises, yeah, the right hand is playing very close to, or there's voice crossing between the hands. The right hand, throughout the whole piece, definitely has our melody. The left hand definitely has an accompanimental figure. Let's be really sure and try to keep them voiced on two separate layers. This is going to be really difficult in some bars. Let's just start from the beginning and I'll play some for you. So, right here, just bar 1. The melody is da, 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 and needs to keep singing, right? Even though we're sustained. In order to continue to show that singing line, da, 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 the left hand needs to be so soft and out of the way that we make sure it doesn't sound like the melody is da 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 bum. Right? That gets confusing, especially because there's a bit of a melodic motif that gets established here, and we don't want to hear it continuing to go down into the bass over and over again. That, what I've just mentioned, is probably going to be the most difficult thing to execute in the piece. We have to have really, really good control over the dynamics that both hands are playing independently. That comes with a lot of time and practice, but it's something that you can definitely aim for. You're going to want to play both hands together for that. So we talked about some reasons to do hand-separate practice. This is a great place, especially because a lot of these times we don't have notes that line up, like in bar 1. Really keep that left hand out of the way. So right there is another example. Da, da, da. Left hand is way down. There, that one might be the hardest in the whole piece because the hands have the same pitch pronounced at 2 separate times. So da da da, and the left hand has the same D. You have to be super careful with that. Okay. The rest of the piece will be easier than that bar, but this is something great to think about and great to look at. And this also goes back to the first thing we talked about, continuing to feel the line in the right place. It seems like you know this piece really well because it's a favorite of yours and you've listened to it for a long time. So make sure you've got that reference in your mind, right, in your inner ear, and continue to refer back to that. And if you find that it's difficult to do that while you're in the middle of playing, make a little recording. Don't have to record the whole thing like you did for us today, but record 4 bars at a time. It's just about every key change. Just record 4 bars, listen back, and reflect on what just happened. Did we miss this and go and have that be too strong? Okay, and then we can go back and really focus on fixing that. Yeah? Okay, that's going to wrap up my comments, Antonio. You've done a great job. There's a lot of stuff that's in this piece that is new for you, yeah? Because the last time we talked, the leaps were nowhere near as large that the left hand had to navigate. You've picked a couple, that we have bars and some difficult keys, whereas the last stuff I've heard you play has been in C, I think. This is quite far away from that. A lot of accidentals to deal with. So really, really great work. And continue to keep it up. Let's give Antonio another round of applause, can we? I should get an applause button for every time that we have a masterclass on the channel. That would be great. Awesome, awesome. I see we've had some more people here. So if you haven't said hi in the chat, please say hi in the chat. And there, Faye's clap. Brilliant. And Jose is here. Awesome. Welcome, Jose. Let me take a look at Rhodes's comment and question here. So let me see. Yeah, I think you had 2. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm going to start with Rhodes's questions, but feel free. We'll just have this open to any Q&A for the whole rest of our time together. And Antonio, if you have any follow-ups as you kind of digest this, feel free to drop those in the chat as well. Okay, so I think the easier question to start with from Rhodesy is your last one, which was about sending in scores. Yes, so you were asking about sending in a score, sending in a composition, and you say you have the score, an online version of it, but you don't have a recording of the piece. Yeah, go ahead and send the score in. And especially if you're looking for input on the composition itself, let me know if it's just like overarching input that you're looking for, or if there's something in particular. And Rhodesy, can you give us a little background? Earlier you said you're self-taught pianist composer. How long have you been writing music? How long have you been playing music? How long have you been writing music? Do you have any music released that we can go listen to? Drop that in the chat for us. Rhodesy says you just emailed a link to the score. Awesome. Awesome. I usually can't easily pull up stuff in a live that just got emailed. So I will definitely take a look at it for next time, which will be in 2 weeks. We do these about every 2 weeks, the second and fourth Wednesday of the month. It's just difficult sometimes, and I don't want to spend like 5 minutes not chatting with everybody while I try to pull something up or load it up for everybody to look at. So Rhodesy says you've played the piano for 7 years on and off, and you love classical music, but you just figured it out all on your own. That's great. Hyper Joe, hello. So let me go back to Rhodesy's first question, and then I see we've gotten a few more that come in, so we'll tackle those one at a time. Your first one was, any tips for a self-taught pianist composer? Yes. So they're going to be a little different. You just said you need to get the theory and sheet music sorted. Okay. Oh gosh, as a pianist, as a self-taught pianist, this is a great resource. So I'm glad you're here. I think most people that tune in here are self-taught pianists that tune into the lives, especially. So this is a great place, and you can always bring your questions here. There are a handful of really good resources online to learn from. Gosh, it's tricky. This is I think the most difficult thing about teaching yourself anything. We'll talk about piano, of course, but is sussing out the really good information from information that's presented well that might be good but you're not ready for yet, or information that's presented well that's actually not good. And then sometimes you can find information online that's presented very poorly, but that actually is very good. And I think that might be one of the trickiest things, because we live in an era where, like, this is amazing. We have access to so much stuff, and it's incredible. It's really incredible. Let me give you a few examples. So, and I'm in no way like slamming on any channels online. I appreciate them all for what they do. I know we have some people that are tuned in here that are also fans of Tone-Based Piano. Tone-Based, fantastic channel. Ben is a great guy. We're Facebook friends. They put out a lot of awesome content. For self-taught beginners, even self-taught early intermediate pianists, it's going to be really difficult to actually understand what they're talking about on that channel, because they're extraordinarily advanced concepts. They're doing a little bit better job of kind of bringing it down to a level that's accessible, but a lot of the teachers that they feature don't teach beginners ever. They probably have never taught a beginner in their life. They're masters, and they're wonderful pianists, and many of them are wonderful teachers, but I think it can be difficult. And some of the things I suggest to do, you already need to have a certain amount of technique built to do it well and to do it the right way and have it be helpful. So that's an example of a place online that's really good content, that's presented really well, that until you're really at the level to digest it and apply it, it can be really difficult to understand what's going on. So what you can do, just consume a lot of content, and focus on trying to play things. This is a big theme here on this channel, as relaxed of a position as you possibly can. How relaxed can we keep our mechanism? How, can we eliminate shoulder tension if our shoulders go up while we play? Can we eliminate wrist tension? Can we eliminate the lifting of the fingers while we play? People that tune in here a lot know that I'm not a big fan of Hannon for many reasons, but especially because of the mistranslation on page 1 of the book that talks about lifting fingers in English. It's not actually what Hannon wrote in French, but it's been translated and now misinterpreted for 100 years plus. That, when you play those exercises, you're supposed to... You can even find, I talked with someone on the channel here about this, you could find Long demonstrating that technique and how great it is. And his video is 6 months before he had to cancel an entire year of concerts because of tendinitis that he probably caused himself by lifting his fingers up for years and years and years and playing through that. So I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of more of the Taubman approach, playing from a relaxed position, and understanding body awareness. So anything that you can do to incorporate rotation of the wrist is great. Anything that we can do to incorporate playing with arm weight is great. I'll leave it there for now, Rhodesy, and you can follow up on that if you'd like, or please send something in that you're working on, and I can give you a lot more directed guidance. Your other thought about being a self-taught composer, that one's a little bit easier to talk about because while composition definitely has a creative component, there's a lot of theory and technique that is very much presented like in textbook form, both in books and in articles online and in videos. So I would do 2 things about composing music. And one is something that Faze-ish actually just said. Do Roman numeral analysis if you can, if you know how to do that. Do analysis of pieces that you love listening to. Get some of the sheet music, especially if they're classical pieces. You can find all that online for free. Get some of that music and do the best Roman numeral analysis you can. If you don't know how to do Roman numeral analysis, try to look up a little bit of that, because Roman numeral analysis teaches us what really sets it apart from, chord names and numbers that are attached to them, like, D sharp minor, A sharp minor 7, all that jazz, right? Literally sometimes. What sets it apart is that Roman numeral analysis also shows us the function of the harmony that's underneath. We really want to understand how harmony functions if we're going to write music that works, that flows well, and that's meaningful to someone else that's listening. And that's my intention as a composer, is always to write music that moves someone else. Like, it's great if it also moves me, but I want to make sure that it moves someone else emotionally too. So you said you have a link to one of your own compositions. You can send it, but I don't know if I can play it here because I'm going to end up showing ads, I think, online to people if it's on, and I can't download it. But please send it over to the email that you already sent stuff to. Let's see. Greg Neiman, I think his name is Neimanchuk. I have not heard of him. So, Bachward's Fellow, welcome, Bachward's Fellow. So, I would do a lot of Roman numeral analysis, Rhodesy, and I would challenge yourself to write simply, without having seen any of your work. How can you say everything you want to say as a composer as simply as possible? Bachward's Fellow says, my camera seems a bit fuzzy. Is anybody else having that problem today? I can try to see if I can do anything. It might be an internet connection thing. So Rhodesy, yeah, write as simply as possible. This is Usually, even with my composition students, we will pick a specific form of piece, usually something simple, like a sonatina or something like that, or even more simple. It could be an ABA piece that isn't even as long as a sonatina, but we will understand the form, and I will challenge my early composition students to write a very short theme, and then we work on how do we write variations, basically, on that theme for the rest of the piece. It might be 32 measures, a 64 measure, and maybe 64 is probably too long. It'll be a short piece, but how do we, how can we analyze something that came from the creative part of our brain, and say, where does it go from here? What happened that we wrote that sounded good in our ear, that came out in our fingers, and then let's analyze what we improvised or what we played from that creative place, and then we break it down into its components, and we say, well, I can use this piece, and I can alter my original theme in this way, and in this way, and in this way, and in this way, and before you know it, we've got an entire piece of music that's all written really around one theme that has an A section and a B section, and the music starts to write itself when we understand those tools. So those are some of my big suggestions without hearing any of your stuff, and please send some over, and we'll definitely take a look at it next time. Great, you've done that, you said, with a little waltz in G flat major. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, Rhodesy, I will look for your email, and I will definitely make sure that we hit that first in the next stream. If you can, pick one of the two things you'd like to talk about, either playing something or a composition that you're working on, and we can dive in and really get into the nitty-gritty on something very specific. But yeah, thanks for that question. Bachward's Fellow, that sounds like it's an internet connection thing on your side. If other people are having it clear the whole time. Let's go back up. So Antonio, this isn't really a follow-up question to our class, but you had a question. At what volume do you record your piano videos for YouTube? That is actually a really complicated question because I have a whole studio set up at home. So there's not a real simple answer to that. Let me ask you a follow-up question, Antonio. When you record videos, how do you set your volume for the recording? And based on, if you're looking for some input on that, I might be able to give you a little bit of input there. But here's just a short spiel about audio work. Oh, yeah, we'll talk about it. I try to get everything that I put out on YouTube to YouTube's guideline volume, which is minus 14 LUFS. It's a technical thing. And so everything that I master, I try to have it meet that on the dot. Some of the stuff on Pianist Academy is not that, because turning up dialogue that much sounds really loud. But if it's a piano, if it's solo piano, if it's performance, I usually try to meet that standard. And that takes a lot of post-production work to get there. That's a simple answer, simple technical answer for people if you are interested in that kind of stuff. See, Antonio said, usually record for minus 20 dB, but they say YouTube is usually 0. The numbers all mean something different depending on the scale that we're talking about. So YouTube is 0 in that we want the peaks of our sound to be as close to 0, usually actually minus 1, because of the way YouTube re-encodes our audio. But if we don't have software to really control that finely, it's not going to really be possible to do that. And Antonio, I will say you could record your stuff with a bit more volume because you're not even close to clipping on the playback on my end. Whenever I've seen your stuff, I actually even your submission today, I turned up a little bit to help align it with a bit more of where the volume of this stream was. So you might try another, let's say, 5 to 7 dB more to start with. And we can go from there, and I can always give you more feedback on that in the future. Let's see. Becky, Bunny Hollow, you said, what if you have no score? I don't know how to do that with my own work. So Becky, when you say that no score, do you mean are you learning stuff by ear? Or are you writing things, but you're not writing them down on paper? Help me answer your question a little bit better. We'll give Becky a second to write back in. It's great to see. I think we have a handful of new people here. Andre, welcome. Steve, you said Steve. Hello from Oregon. Hello, Steve. Great to see you here. Let's see. Becky said making it up on piano. So improv style stuff. And your question was, what if you have? So how do you do that with no score? It comes down to an understanding of harmony. Yeah. Or if you want to write it down. So is your goal, Becky, to write down, notate out something that you've improved? That's called transcription, and depending on how complicated what you've improved is, that can be a really daunting task. If we're improving something that's, I don't know, let's say, whatever, something like that. That's going to be relatively easy to transcribe because things are very in line. They're very on the beat. There's not a lot of syncopation. It takes a lot of study and skill at transcription to take something you've played or that anybody's played and turn it into sheet music. So, gosh, if that's something that you really want to do, I would start actually by hiring somebody else to do a piece or two of yours, and then you can see what's going on. There's a service called I think it's mymusictranscriptions.com. Welcome, OCD King. So Becky, you might check out something like that first because we want to have something that we can study about our own playing, and gosh, beyond that, we want to have a really wonderful grasp on beat and rhythm and meter. I think that's the most important. If you've improved something, you might still, after it's done, have a good idea of what the pitches are, or you'll know the key you're in and the kind of modality you were playing with, motifs that were in your fingers. So the pitches themselves might come out more quickly. But for most people that I know, transcribing the rhythm is the really, really difficult part. So we want to have an intricate understanding of beat, all of the subdivisions of beat, and how they work together and what they sound like. And when we play with syncopation, the first thing I'd suggest is learn where to place your note head. Can we just get the note head on the right beat in the measure? Then we'll worry about like all the rest of the stuff that comes after that, like putting our ties in, making sure it looks pretty, making sure it's readable for someone else, following notational rules and concepts. That'll be secondary. But I encourage you, take a measure at a time. And that's exactly what a professional transcriber would do as well. They would take one measure, loop it, play it back a whole bunch, until, for me, the way I do it is I internalize what I've heard. I learn how to replay it usually on the keyboard, one bar at a time, and then I notate it. Transcription is a very time-consuming process unless you're Mozart. Maybe a few other people in history. Yeah. So, but buddy, yeah, definitely keep going. You say you get a jingle and then you just play it. That's great. Make a recording, play it, make a recording. And yeah, I would still say it's pretty cheap to have this done online today, especially if what you're improving isn't extraordinarily complex. So you might be able to get something that you improv that's a minute long done for like $20 or $30. That can be a massive educational experience for you. If you send them your file, you get their sheet music back, and you say, oh, that's how this is supposed to look on the page. So that's where I'd go with that. Yeah. Here's another idea for you, Becky. If you've got a particular question, let's say like how to transcribe bars XYZ, let's say not more than like 2 to 4 measures, send a recording over and we can talk about it on a live stream. I've never talked about transcription on the channel before. So that would be a fun thing to talk about in one of these live streams. That would be great. But let's make sure it's a real small chunk because, like I just said, 1 or 2 bars is going to take a lot of time to do live. And then I can talk you through the process, and we can continue to learn more from there. All right, we have some great fingerings. Great, I saw fingerings in the chat. I said great fingerings. We have great questions. I saw Hyper Joe's question about fingerings. Let me see if is that the next one we're going to. It might be. I think it is. So Hyper Joe, you asked how to play the first bars of Gymnopédie number 1, and what are the fingerings? First bars. Well, let's take a quick look at that, Hyper Joe. Okay. Oh, my iPad turned off. Give me just a second. We'll try that again. Instead of going to a completely black screen, that's no help to anybody. Here we go. That's much better. All right. Let's start with we'll start with some of these chords, and then we'll get into one statement of the melody, and I'll let you have at it after that point. So these things in the left hand are single notes that are in the left hand. Let's change that. So all of these guys. I wouldn't worry so much about exactly a fingering to go with that. If you need one, probably 2 and 5 are going to be great for these. It'll keep our hand in one place. Personally, I wouldn't play it like that. I'd probably play 3 on each of them. For a musical reason and a technical reason. Because when I play these low pitches, I would like to have more of a bell-like tone. So I want to release them a certain way. And I'm going to feel that more easily if I use 3 on each rather than changing fingers. But depending on where you are in your study, if that's complicated because we have to shift the hand around, pick one hand position. We'll start with 2 and 5. And we can continue on from there. We don't have to move very often at all, right? Now, if we look at the chords that go with this, right hand chords, 1, 3, 5, and 1, 2, 5 on those, while the right hand can take it. Then when we switch, obviously, that's not going to work anymore. Now we're going to have 5 on each of these. And the chords will now be This is, I think, one of the occasions where it's going to be okay to put a thumb on a black key. Because I want to avoid playing 5 to 5. I don't want to play 2 5s in a row, which I'd have to do in order to get thumb off the black key. I don't want to do that. So this chord is now going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 5. And we'll continue that on 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 5. Yeah. That feels good. Now the right hand. Let's start with 3 on the top. So 5, 4, 3. We'll have a little bit of a stretched 2. Thumb on that B. And then I'd say let's use 3 on C sharp, 4 here. I think we end with thumb then. Yeah. Now, if you really want to be picky about finger legato, we can connect across. We can finger legato with a good scale type motion from our A down to F. But this piece is so flooded with pedal, I honestly wouldn't worry about that. I would just lift, and I might still play with 3. We can actually have so I'm not going to go any further with the fingerings on this piece, because we could spend a whole lot of time just writing them in the rest. But quick note about finger choices. Oh, and then, oh, great. We have so many more questions. This is awesome. Oh, I saw one from David. I'm looking forward to that one, talking about Chopin's first ballade. Great. We're going to get there, David, I promise. Okay. Quick note about finger choices. 3 is kind of an anchor for the hand. So anytime that we need to play with a lot of control and we have time and we can move the hand to this place, we can center it over 3. I'm going to choose 3. That's part of the reason why when I demonstrated, I said I wanted a 3 in the left hand for these first notes. 3 is very easy to control. We almost always, we're going to have great alignment on 3, and it's going to be a very efficient finger to play with. So, anytime that I want to really place a melody note precisely, and I know I've got time to do it, no matter what piece we're talking about, especially if I don't need to finger connect them, play with 3. You can use that in a whole bunch of repertoire. Okay. Oh gosh, let me find where we were in the questions. That was great question, Hyper Joe. I hope I answered it because you asked how to play the first few bars, so we talked specifically about fingering. So I hope that was helpful, Hyper Joe. Let's see. I'm just going through the comments, the chat here, and trying to find the next question. Andre question here. Okay. Andre said, are there tips on how to speed up pieces? You've been struggling to speed up Heller's Avalanche, especially the triplet runs that use hand crossings. Oh, Jan, thank you for the super. I appreciate that. And hi. Yeah, well, hello. I think that was the first time you chimed in the chat, so thank you. Okay, and Andre's question, speeding up, especially triplets that use hand crossings. Take things in groupings. So let's find small groupings of music to play could be half a bar, 1 bar, 2 bars. And we're going to push the tempo of those small groupings. And hopefully, I don't have any of the Heller pieces on my iPad, so I can't pull them up for us. But what we want to do is make sure that our mind and our hands, what we're executing the music with, that they are continuing to stay together, that the process is staying intact, right? So by creating short groupings, very, very short groupings, sometimes I say this and students will play like a phrase, which might be 4 bars or 8 bars long. That's way too long. So let's take very short groupings and work on speed in those very, very small amounts of music. So let's say I'm just going to make up some hand crossings here. So that's just A minor. What we can say is, let's take the first one of those, that, before a hand crossing appears. If our maximum tempo that we can play is around here, okay, let's speed that up by 10 or 20% in this very, very small group. Can we add one more note now beyond the group? Not even the hand position, one more. Hopefully play it with the correct finger, the finger you're going to need to use to maintain the rest of the phrase. Whether it's 3 or 5, whatever it is, 4. So now I'm working on a little bit of a bigger group. If we need to continue pushing the tempo beyond that, keep the group small. Right? Before we even go on, can we have our left hand, since this is a crossing, can we have our left hand ready and aligned to play the next pitches before they even need to play anything? I will try to show you this from the top. Okay, here we are. So here's it in slow motion, cross. But my goal now is at speed. I want to have this position, and I want to already be ready to play it when the 4th finger comes over the top. So, no matter how fast it is. Right? If we end up playing something like this in our practice, well, now our hand is nowhere near where it actually is going to need to be. And that's not going to help us very much, right? So we want to be looking ahead enough to know that where we need to move from here. Let's put our hand in that place and then extend the grouping. There we go. That's the first place that I would look for creating speed. It's a similar principle as when we need to build speed in like repeated chords. The technique is a little bit different, but we're going to take small groupings and work on increasing speed in small groups. Then we play grouping, 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 grouping. We can go through a whole phrase playing in these rhythms. And then slowly we put that all back together. By slowly, I mean we focus on playing in groupings for days, if not maybe weeks. And then what we're doing is we're pushing our fingers and our mind to go faster and to get comfortable going faster in small enough tidbits that both the mechanism and the mind and the ear can grasp it. And it's all staying together, right? As soon as we speed up to the point where something falls behind, we're going to, 1, make a mistake, or 2, we're going to be out of rhythm and we're going to feel like we have to slow down. Usually that's because either we don't know where the hand goes well enough yet, or our inner ear, our mind, doesn't know what's supposed to happen. Yeah? So we want to bridge those gaps first. That's really what we want to do. And while we do that, we're also working on quick technical execution in short bursts. Oh, Rhodesy, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the super. I appreciate that. And Andre, I think, so I hope that's helpful. Great, yes. Try, and Andre, like I mentioned before here, feel free if you're working on one of the Heller etudes, send in a recording. I love hearing people play. And then we can really dive into some some super nitty-gritty. Bachward's Fellow, this is a great suggestion. It's similar to the rhythmic practice that I just described, but he's taking it another step here. He says, breaking up triplets into duple, long, short, and almost like a swing pattern. In fact, there's a lot of scale technique that's even taught that way. If we're going to play, if we're working on speed, and then so that's long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, right? And then we switch it. And then we put it together. And hopefully, over time and practice, we're going to be getting better. That's a great tried and true method, what Bachward's Fellow just said. So triplets into duples. You can even do that with non-triplet figures. We can still create dotted rhythms out of them. I need to go back and get some more questions, but since this just came up, Jose asked, can you say something about thinking ahead or hearing what comes next? Oh, Bachward's Fellow said long, short, short. Oh, triplets. Long. That's great. Similar principle. Yeah, yeah. And you could also, this is much more difficult, but you could play them and shift where the long note is. That's another great practice technique. Shift where the long note is, or shift where our pause is in the middle of our phrase. Let me touch on what Jose said very recently, and then I'll pop back and get into some more of these questions. Jose said, can you say something about thinking ahead or hearing what comes next? Yeah. Let's pull up something a little more challenging here. Since I really want to get to David's question about the ballade, we're going to take a look at Chopin's first ballade. And we'll take a look at the first page. Let's see. Okay, so I have never performed the piece, but I've taught it a lot, and I've played it in lessons for students a lot, so I can play it decently well. Let's skip over the introduction for now and just get into where the theme is established down here. So when I am reading a piece of music, I'm going through the same process as if it's already memorized, in a sense. When I look at the bar that I'm going to start with, which is going to be this note, I think about that note before I start playing. I'm thinking about the pitch, how I'm going to attack it, how it's going to lead into the next phrase, how it's going to attach to the melody in the right hand. And then, of course, I'm thinking about what the right hand is going to do. I visualize all of that, and I hear it in my mind before I play a note. Once I've heard it, then I go ahead and play. Beyond that, when let's say we're playing something from memory, and so I'm going to try not to look at it if I can play any of the notes without. If I'm playing something from memory, there's a combination of things that's going on where I am both present in the moment that every note is depressed, but I also intensely, almost instinctively know, because I've studied something so well, exactly where I'm going. So I can play the first bar of the theme, and I already know that I have to go bum, bum. Let me play the left hand correct. So I have to look at it for that. So I'm thinking about the next melody, and the next melody note here, C, and there's C. Now I'm thinking about the next phrase, and I'm kind of trying to say this in real time. The next chord, and ba. So I'm both trying to be present and make sure that I understand exactly how I'm phrasing something in the moment, but also thinking about exactly what's coming next. Because if I'm aware enough and understand enough of a piece of music This is by memory time, by performance time. I should be able to visualize with my eyes closed. Many of you, you can try this if you want to. Visualize yourself at the piano, in front of the keyboard, play the entire piece in your mind, watching yourself play it without moving your fingers. If you can do all of that, you have memorized something really well. And while you do that, hear the sound that you want produced, all in your imagination. I feel like that's kind of our end goal in performance. If we're going to perform something that is really stable, that we know extremely well, we can do that. But that's also linked to sight reading in a way, because if I'm sight reading something, let me see if there's... Okay, this isn't going to be exactly sight reading, but it's not something that's super in my fingers. So it'll be somewhat similar. So I'm looking at here now, measure 150, this guy. If I'm sight reading this, I'm trying to keep at least, let's say, a quarter note ahead or more if possible, with my eyes and with my mind from where my fingers are. So as soon as I play the downbeat, I'm thinking about this. I'll put it in a different color. When red gets played, I think about blue, right? And then when this gets played, I'm thinking about the next quarter note. Those might be even too small of groups, but that's a general idea. I might go even 2 beats, 2 quarter note beats. So when I'm here, whoops, let's put that back in red. If I'm playing here, I'm thinking about what's going to happen here. And that's going to lead me to have the hand prepped to do the next thing. Yeah. And then where I'm pausing, I'm actually employing a similar principle as what we just talked about, where I'm playing things instinctively in groups. They're not exactly following the phrase that I should be, but I'm creating technical groups for myself, where I'm saying, I have read this far, I need a little bit of, because I'm playing this a bit fast for a sight read, I need time to catch up now. If I was going to slow it down to the point where I didn't have to do that, so that's just about a sight read. But all of the time, as I'm playing, I'm about 2 beats in front of where the hands are. And trying to familiarize myself with the motion I need to make before it gets made. So I think that touched on a little bit of both of Jose's follow-up questions there. Thinking ahead, hearing what comes next. The more we can do all of that, the better our sight reading is, the better our memory is, the better our performance, the more established and grounded we're going to feel in performance. And we can start doing simple things, one measure at a time. Think about it this way. If you're working on, let's say, a sight reading exercise, or you have a sight reading book. Oh, thanks, Jose, for the super. I appreciate it. Thank you. If you're working on a sight reading exercise and it's appropriate for your level, let's say, you're playing a level 5 music. Let's sight read something that's level 1 or 2. Okay? A couple levels below. If it's 8 measures long, can you, before you play any of it, can you memorize the first 2 bars? Can you do that? Challenge yourself to do that. And say, I'm not playing anything, I'm not ghosting anything or hovering or doing any physical motion at the keyboard. Can you look at the score and can you imagine exactly what it's going to feel like to play and sound like? You might get it right. You might be way off, and that's okay, because then, as we learn more and more about doing this, we're going to join those 2 things together. We're going to join our inner ear with the motions that are happening. And when those 2 are working really well together, you're going to be able to do this on the fly. That's how some of the greatest, especially collaborative pianists, some of the greatest collaborative pianists in the world can sight read performance quality, arias and art, sometimes even art song. And they can do it extraordinarily well at rehearsal one with no preparation. Or when, let's say like auditions for the Met in New York, there's going to be a pianist there. That pianist is not going to know what any of the vocalists are bringing in to sing. They're going to literally get the music when the singer walks up. Now, chances are somebody with a job like that, they've probably played it before, but they still have no preparation time. So it may have been 20 years ago the last time they played X aria. Guaranteed that's not going to feel like it's in their fingers anymore. And so they're going to be employing all sorts of these techniques of knowing exactly where we are, having probably a familiarity with what the music sounds like, and if they don't, they can see it on the page. It's like reading a book. We can read a paragraph and we can create a beautiful image and scene around what we read. But we can only do that if we're fluent in what we read, right? So if we're reading words in our native language or one of the languages that we're fluent in, if you're multilingual, you have that capability, right? But we also know that until we've reached that point, there's a lot of words on a page, and we have to go through sometimes multiple times to digest and understand, right? And music is the same way. It's a language. Just like the written word, all of the notes on the page are telling a story. And the more time we have with it, and the more we understand that, the more fluent we're going to get in reading the notes on the page and understanding all this stuff. Great question, Jose. That was fun. Okay, let me go back up. I think I missed so many questions. Okay. So let's see. Bachward's fellow had said before, analysis is generally helpful, a tool. Yeah, I agree with that. Oh, Antonio had a comment here. This goes back to Becky's question about notating improv. And he said if it's a digital, you can use, there are a couple programs. He mentions Rose Garden or MuseScore to record your notation. If it's simple enough and you're a good enough player to play exactly with the click or close enough that it can quantize correctly, that works. I've never had a great experience with a MIDI keyboard notating correctly. It gets the hands wrong, it gets the voicings wrong, a lot of times it gets the rhythms wrong. But that's also because stuff I write is not, it's not meant to be played with a click. And so if I'm improving, I might not be in strict tempo. I might be shifting, and I know where the pulse is, but the computer doesn't. So. Okay. Steve had said, let's see. You don't know much about harmony beyond the circle of fifths, and asked if I recommend Walter Piston's books or something else. And Bachward's fellow had kind of followed up. Thanks for following up on that. Honestly, before I would dive into any more books, I would get just a quick understanding online, do some searches for like function of harmony. Hopefully you will find a handful of short articles that can start guiding you in the right directions. Function of harmony, understand what is tonic, predominant, and dominant. What do they mean? How are they different? How is that the same and different from are what we call different Roman numeral chords? What is tonic prolongation? So you can Google all of these kinds of things to start to get a better understanding. And another thing to Google, what are secondary dominant chords? That's going to play right into your circle of fifths knowledge. And once you start to have a grasp of that stuff, and a grasp of, let's say, just simple diatonic harmony, what are the seven Roman numerals in seven diatonic Roman numerals in a major key and in a minor key? Once you've got a good grasp on that, I would then maybe start to consider another book. But hopefully you can take some of these little phrases that I've given you. You can Google those one at a time. And if you like printing things out, print out an article. I can't think of the name of the website offhand, but there's a theory page that most commonly, when I need to look up theory, it's because I can never for the life of me remember the different types of augmented sixth chords. Even in school, it was just not the greatest thing for me to remember. And today, when I'm composing stuff and I say, well, that's close, and I can't remember the difference between Italian and French and German, and so I look it up. And there's always this one page that comes up that is super succinct. I wish I could tell you what page it was, but what I'm getting at is I think that if you put this terminology in, you're going to find that site, and you're going to find a couple others where they're pretty short, but very, very accurate descriptions of concepts in harmony. I do that first before I go and dive into a large book or a textbook of any kind. Hello, John. I'm trying to catch up on questions here, and I will try to get to your question that you just chimed in with. I'm a little behind, which is a great thing. Okay, let's see. Faze, it looks like Bachward's Fellow and Faze-ish, you've been kind of chatting about stuff. Faze, are your questions answered, or do you have a new question or like a follow-up after all of your chat with Bachward's Fellow? Like your last one, you say, I see people analyze Neapolitan as a Phrygian borrowed chord. Guarantee you, if it's a classical piece of music, it would not have been thought of as a Phrygian borrowed chord. If it's being analyzed by a jazz musician, they'll analyze it as a Phrygian borrowed chord. I don't know, oh gosh, almost in my harmony textbooks that are on my bookshelf, just off camera next to me, the modes, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, etc., they're introduced in the beginning of the book, and they're almost not referenced again over the course of 800 pages because it's classical theory, classical harmony. There's very little reference again to them. I think I've caught up to David's question. I don't even know. David, are you still here? Raj is here. Hello, Raj. Let's see if I can jump into David's question, because I really wanted to talk about this. What's your interpretation for the first page of Chopin's Ballade No. 1? Oh, that's really hard to give one answer to. But let's talk about that real quick. So here we are, back at page 1. At some point here, there we go. Let's just erase some of that stuff. I like to, in my interpretation, really lean into a couple things in the opening passage. I like to lean into what the dynamic is marked, and passante, heavy, very, almost lumbering, so... much like almost a lot of the pitches throughout that first phrase are going to get quasi-accents. I also like to voice up the lowest pitch in the first octave. And then keep the pedal very active so that there's not too much blur. I don't like it when it's amorphous like that. Chopin only writes piano here. There we go. He only writes piano, but I tend to feel this as extraordinarily quiet. So really drawing a contrast between our really bold opening and this that's almost becoming whispered. And feel a breath. And really embrace that dissonance. I'm probably taking more liberty now than I'd really love to in performance, because it is just the first statement of the theme. So I might keep that a little bit more straight. Some of my voicings are good, and some of these, the inner voicings here, I could be playing a little bit better. Second time around, when this is restated, I'm going to be more bold and with more forward momentum. A little bit bigger dynamic. For the sake of going to that high G and then backing away. And then where are we at here? Let's try that again. Such great music, I don't really want to stop. So, I don't know if that was exactly to David's question, but that's kind of a little talk through my interpretation of the first page, generally speaking. So David, does that answer your question? Is there anything in particular you want to know more about? I'd be happy to talk more about that. It's just such a great piece of music. Thanks, Jose. I appreciate that. Let me see. David, is there something that I'm imagining? Yeah. Intense sadness and sorrow. Spurred on by like a miniature outburst. So that's what it's in the first line for me. This is a bit of an emotional outburst. Through everything that's marked passante, that loses steam and loses energy. It's almost like I'm imagining shaking my fist at something, and then it's so intense of a feeling, it drains me immediately, which is why when we get to the next phrase, it's so quiet and reserved, because all of the intensity and all of that has left me. I'm really just thinking about a singer. I don't have any words to put to the piece, but a vocalist emoting like sorrow over death of a loved one. Something that deep, that dark, almost not depressed, but such an intense feeling, right? And then, as the piece continues to go on, we start to ride a little bit of a roller coaster of emotion, where there are lots of high points and lots of really low points. And later on, when we achieve our major. Oops. Oh, sorry. You can tell I'm reading. Obviously, that is no longer in the same emotional place, but we've gone through so much in the meantime. That's 67 bars, 68 bars later. There's a lot of emotion that happens in the meantime, but that kind of sums up the first page. Jose says, please, please. I'm working on, I've been saying this for a long time. I'm working on practicing the coda when I have time. It needs a little bit of work. Let me jump back, because I still have some questions I need to get back to here. Oh, let's see. I'm just seeing Scott. So Scott, if you're still here, hello. Hello, Scott. Sparrowhawk has a question about one of my originals. So let's talk about that. And then, okay, we've got a question about Rock 2, Rock Second Sonata, and John's question. And Rhodes music. No, Rhodes, I'm not gonna. That's why I mentioned earlier. I don't think there's not a chance I'm gonna get to it today. I have to have time to pull that up, because I have I don't have access to email right now. Even that's so that I don't get interrupted on my iPad while I'm showing you stuff here and all that stuff. So I will take a look at anything that you've sent over. For the next time, and I'll probably send you a follow-up email too. So let's see, Sparrowhawk. You're talking about Watson's Waltz, which is a piece I wrote 4 years ago or so. You have a question about measures 93 and 94. I haven't played this in a couple years, so let's see what we have here. Yeah. Okay. Close to what it is. Sparrow, biggest thing, understand the, I've tried to actually write this as pianistic as possible. So there's a whole lot that simply happens in a 5-finger position. So, la da da da. Let's see, all of that to C. In fact, that's one, but then this other one, these are all within one hand position. So we start with 2. And if you need to do some technical work to speed it to that point, we can do any of the rhythmic practice we've talked about earlier. Little groupings. etc. But when we've achieved a bit more dexterity here and fluidity, understand, don't try to pick any strange fingerings. This is one hand position. And we cross to 3, I'm pretty sure. And we have 1, and then we have a straight, another hand position all the way to the G, all the way to there. Cross to 4. And then 3 on B flat. So everything that's, let's say, between the 4 and the 3, or before the 3, that's another one hand position. So one hand position, one hand position, one hand position. So you can also, once we have achieved a bit of a quicker tempo, we can practice that together. One hand position. Right? Last little bit of advice. Absolutely do not try to play, do not try to count or line up what note of the 16 or the 22 is supposed to go on what beat. I'm even going to turn off the music while we talk about this, because the whole point is that we start together on D, and then we land in this new harmony. And everything else flows like a cadenza. It's very free. It's not metered. So those are a couple of my suggestions for that particular bit. Yeah, you said that, because those are exact fingerings, but the speed. Take it slow and work on some accents. Also, don't try to play it legato with finger connection, because if I play it quickly, what's happening is, if I slow down, is that. I think that's supposed to be an F sharp, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe one more thing for speed practice and speed purposes. Know there's basically 2 scales that I'm presenting here. C minor, right? Basically, and then G harmonic. G harmonic minor. But you can't slow down the left hand. Listen to my recording, because actually, there's going to be you can have a little bit of push and pull, but in general, we want to keep the waltz figure. But you can have a little bit. It's not cheating too much. Oh gosh. Okay. Let me see how many more questions we can get through before I need to run today. Let's see. Raj had that question about the thirds passages in the third movement of the Rock Second Sonata. And John's question, advice on managing the left hand in Chopin's Prelude number 4. Yep. Okay. And Dith, looks like the Dith has a question on composing. Okay. We're going to keep on the same theme here. So going back to Raj's question about now I can't find it, but it was about Rachmaninoff Second Sonata, third movement. Let's see, I have it on here somewhere. And passages in thirds. Might be something like something like that. Great. Okay. So this is if that's the case, Raj, and it's that type of passage work we're talking about, and not simple thirds that are being articulated in one hand, which I don't really see much of. I would do, again, something that we've mentioned to other people. It's kind of amazing how far certain type of technical practice can take us and the kinds of pieces it can apply to. So if I have thirds to play in the bottom of a hand, let's pick some to make accents on. The easiest is going to be where the hand plays together. Let me see if Raj has chimed in. Oh, come on. Right before the coda. Is it I'm not seeing more thirds, Raj. And I don't have any measure numbers. Oh, so you said yes, that part, which is, see, where was I? Okay. Yeah. So, okay, similar advice is what I was going to give you about the other section as well. So, let's feel, we've talked about this in the other time we talked about this sonata. We need to feel down impulses and up impulses. We need to give ourselves groupings, and we need to make sure that the wrist is going to continue to stay in motion. If we think about this as being something as technically challenging as like playing repeated notes or chords, if we're going to do this really well, the wrist is always moving. There can be a little lateral movement. There can be a little up and down movement, right? So we want to make sure that this isn't locked at all. We're not here and stiff and trying to articulate. So that's the first thing. Second, we need to pick points where we're going to launch ourselves into the phrase, even though it's piano. Let's see. So I might divide this into two, like so there's two groupings. So we're going to feel a launch or a drop in there. I'm playing this with right now 2 and 3. And a release or a lift. These are also pre-building in some of this wrist motion that I just mentioned. So a drop in and then a release. And then I might practice with also a drop in on the same pitch where I re-articulate that. And then release again at the end of the phrase. And these in our practice can actually be pretty aggressive. Now, can I also start with a drop in on the A instead? So, each of these times I'm focusing on this articulation with the wrist and impulses to launch us through tricky passages. If our articulation of the thirds in particular of this, we're having trouble articulating them simultaneously or with enough strength, let's use a little bit of forearm rotation to make sure that our alignment is better. Yeah. So that, let me blow this up a little bigger for you. So that when we're playing the upper notes, I am rotating in really toward 5. Anytime 5 is being played. So I'm working on 2 sets of kinds of motion, and hopefully in all of this practice you already know that we're also inherently moving the arm through the phrase, right? And we keep going from there. And challenge, how much faster than tempo can you play it in groups? Can you really blow way beyond the tempo you need when we give ourselves that little break? How much faster than tempo can you go? Try to achieve 5-10% beyond tempo. And then we can pull it back, and hopefully all of this stuff is going to be programmed into our technique. If we're focused too much on line and on legato, and we're really focused on articulating the thirds, that's going to totally prohibit us from being as flexible and as fluid as we need to be. If we're playing this piece in a big hall, we're playing it on a really large instrument, right? Even if we're sparing with the pedal, when we're in a space that this is going to be performed in, we are not going to hear any kind of disconnection when we're playing it at speed in a hall where inherently in a hall we have to use less pedal than we use in the practice room. So don't be afraid of not having all kinds of finger legato, because finger legato in virtuosic passages is a complete enemy. Complete. I hope that's helpful, Raj. Those are my tips for you today. And Seth, hello, Seth. Oh, let me see. Let me figure out. I have to answer John's question. John's question is about Chopin's Prelude number 4 and about managing the left hand. I have a couple tips for sure that I can share with you, John. And let me see. I will try to get through. Oh, you had a follow-up about Seymour Bernstein's hairpins. And okay, Dith's question and and Seth's question, who just came in. Okay, I think I'm going to try to manage all of those, and I can't promise I will get to any more because I'm going to have to run pretty soon. Okay, so let's tackle John's question about Chopin. Do I even have those on here? I do. Okay. It's not the most beautiful score, but it'll work for us today. Okay. So, Chopin's 4th Prelude is, of course, that one. Very famous piece. And John's question in particular was managing the left hand, because the left hand tends to overpower the right hand melody. This is one of the things that actually makes this piece incredibly challenging. A lot of pianists tend to play this early on in your study, early on in a performing career. A lot of professionals then will use it as an encore later on or something like that. But the technique that we need to develop or have developed to play all of the left hand throughout this piece needs to be so refined. So some of the things that we can apply throughout the piece, we can actually learn from the last couple chords. So if we take a look just at the last 3 chords here, and here we have octaves instead of chords, but octaves in the left, at least. So we want to be sure, well, first of all, like we talk about regularly here, nice supported bridge, really, really, really good, making sure none of our other knuckles are collapsing. If we're losing energy in any of the places in the hand, this is going to prove to be extraordinarily difficult to keep quiet. all of the left hand in the whole piece. So we don't want any of our let's say final knuckles, right? We don't want any of them collapsing on playing. We don't want the middle knuckles collapsing. We don't want the bridge collapsing. We need everything in a very, very, we can even say firm, I'd say. Firm and supported position. We spend a lot of time talking about tension as a bad thing, but structure is created from good tension. So when we are putting the body in the optimal place that it needs to be, especially for something as controlled as this, there is a bit of, we can't play from a point of pure relaxation, because if we did, we would simply flop around and nothing would happen, right? So we have to have a grasp of what is good tension and where is it. Good tension is structure. Bad tension prohibits us from playing, okay? Structure is in the hand and in the wrist and in the arm and in the shoulder and even in the core and in the back. When we have things aligned well and we're supporting our playing all the way from the bottom of the back, we can achieve both extraordinarily quiet playing and extraordinarily big playing. Okay, that's structure. That's a complicated thing in itself, but I want to move on to the next point. When we have that structure, especially because a lot of these chords, whether it's at the beginning or these octaves at the end, we can't be doing really big preparatory motions, because if we do, we're probably going to land far too loudly and with too much of an accent. So we want to feel very minimal. I don't even know if the camera is so far away for what I'm going to show you, but you might be able to see this. In the octave, let's start there because it's simple. There's the slightest preparatory motion. Can you see that? Up, very small, and then a drop in. And the drop in is coming from, we're seeing it in the wrist, but there's also a feeling of it happening from the elbow. And so I'm not trying to articulate these with fingers. Right? I'm keeping the fingers with a very firm structure, and I'm articulating the octave, and subsequently we'll articulate the chords throughout the piece from the arm. We're going to have a lot more control with the arm, whether we're here at the end or right in bar one. So each of these, you see there's little pulsing motions. I'm not holding this. So here's a great example of the difference between structure and tension. If I'm tense, I'm going to be holding everything and trying to play like this, which you can already hear is not as quiet, and it's the wrong color, right? If I let go of the tension but maintain the structure, this is all free to move. We're doing this kind of thing with a little bit of cushion in the wrist. So in a sense, we're playing all of these eighth notes from the arm. We have to move our fingers to the right place. Yeah. Another thing that you can do, especially throughout all of these chords, the chords throughout the whole piece, start from a place at least on the key surface. If not, as we continue to play, don't let the keys release all the way. And if we can continue to play from within the key, we're going to be able to articulate these and still play very, very quietly. Yeah. So that, I think, sums that up. Play in the keys. We're going to play with the arm, and we need to have really good structure in the hand, the wrist, the arm, the shoulder, and in the back. So that is, oh gosh, that's why this piece is so difficult, because a lot of times it takes sometimes years of playing to really achieve that kind of technique. Decades of playing sometimes to really achieve the pinnacle of that technique. Yet, a lot of us play this prelude when, we've been studying for a year or something. It's fantastic to reach for, and it's a fantastic goal to have, and have patience with yourself, because in no way do we ever want to let our good structure become bad tension. right? So we'll continue to work on that. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to skip for today John's question about Seymour Bernstein's hairpins. We've talked about that on other live streams for sure, and I don't know if John is still here. So, and also, Seymour Bernstein does a fantastic job of explaining it. I would just kind of be saying the same thing that he is. Let's see. Dith had a question about when you're composing a piece, how do you decide what accidentals to use? How do you choose G sharp over A flat? Oh, and also remind people about the like button. If you haven't clicked the like button, the thumbs up, could you click it for me? Thanks, Dith. I'd appreciate that. So when I'm composing, the choice of accidental all has to do with the function of harmony, which is why understanding harmonic function is important. So if I'm in the key of A flat, I'm always going to use A flat, unless if I'm really far away from diatonic harmony and I'm functioning far away from that. Let's say I need to play dominant movement to A, and in this case, A would be, I think, the Neapolitan of A flat. So let's say we have movement like that. I'm in A flat. When I'm playing an A flat chord, I play A flat. When I play the same pitch and harmonically, it's going to be written as G sharp because it's functioning in actually A major and then back. Here, you'd have two choices. Do you really want to show the dominant function? Or do you really want to show E flat and then how the next chord is functioning back in A flat? In which case, this would be, B flat, B double flat. Yeah, B double flat. See, D flat, F flat. So the choice of accidental, we'll sum that up. The choice of accidental comes straight back to how is it functioning and what key is it functioning in. If something is incredibly chromatic, we have some leeway with some of that, and I generally will try to write the same accidental as what's in the key signature if possible. So a general rule, unless we are functioning, let's say, further away from our diatonic center, our accidentals are mostly going to match the accidentals in the key signature. As soon as we start functioning in keys that move further and further away, we're going to use accidentals that relate to those keys. And if they happen to be the opposite, a sharp instead of a flat, then we will use those instead. That's also why you'll see sometimes chords spelled like what I just did. B double flat, D flat, F flat. That's fairly rare to see on paper, but when you do see it, it's because the composer and the editor have chosen to show a particular harmonic function and not show you the what it feels like to play this. And I think there's a little bit of a debate in notation about when you show which, because if we're writing something really serious, yeah, we should probably show the harmonic movement. If we're writing something for the sake of making it easier to read, which is a very important thing, we probably should stay away from double sharps and double flats if possible, and instead write a shape, a chord shape that's more readily seen, that's much more common. And in those cases, we end up sacrificing showing the function of harmony for the sake of making it more sight readable. Because even if you're a very advanced sight reader and you come across double sharps and double flats, they almost always make you pause and have to take a really close look at what's going on. Whereas if the same chord is written enharmonically in a simple shape, we're just going to fly through that. We'll breeze through it. So I hope that answers your question, Dith. Great. And David, if David's still here, we would love to hear your ballade. It's been a while on the stream since we talked about it, but if you're still here, we'd love to hear it. All right, Seth's question. Seth, greetings. I'm glad you were able to tune in. Seth said, if your left elbow is below the keys, forcing the wrist to raise when, let's see, if your left elbow is below the keys, forcing the left wrist to raise when the right arm is in a neutral position, what would be a good way to compensate for this? That's a very awkward position, Seth. So I'd first check your bench height, because if one arm is neutral and the other is not, we either have a problem with bench height or we have a problem with maybe like leaning in one direction too much. Yeah. So the only way I can achieve that, if I lower the bench to lower than I like to be, now everything's kind of too low. So if I sit way up, I can make this correct, but it feels horrible. And now I'm leaning right to raise this, and this is depressed, lower than it should be. That's all fixed for me, bench height. Soon as it's in the right place, what we should be feeling is that from the shoulders, the arms simply hang. They hang off the shoulders. And if we hinge at the elbow and put our hand on the key and don't engage the shoulder at all, the arm is still hanging from the shoulder. And when it's hanging here, the elbow should not be below the keys. Yeah, no matter how often you watch Glenn Gould play. Right? Don't let the elbow be below the keys. So sitting up straight, hanging from the shoulder, hinge, parallel. That's what we want to achieve. Now, if we do that with one arm and not with the other, we might be leaning in one direction too much. Our neutral position isn't actually neutral then. We're leaning toward right arm or toward left arm. So we want to address that secondarily. Yeah, that's exactly where I would look for that, because it's probably not it's more of a postural thing than a technical thing. And if you find yourself as you play that we go into this kind of position, as soon as you recognize that, try to take stock of everything that your body is doing. Is it leaning? Are we leaned in? Are we leaned to a side? Have we slouched somehow? Any of those types of things. Because if we can fix it just simply with our posture, we for sure want to do that and not try to manipulate our technique in any other way. Okay, Seth, let's see. Circling back, you said scoliosis. I would still raise the bench higher if we can. If there's a little bit of physiological stuff that we can't overcome, let's raise the bench to make sure one arm at a time can both arms be elbows at key height or even slightly above. I would much rather have a pianist play if we can't be even on both arms. I would much rather see a pianist play with it a little elevated than too low. Too low for sure is going to cause some major problems in the future, and as we tackle more and more technically challenging stuff. Too high can cause some problems, but it's going to be a lot less. So I would lean in that direction also. Oh, okay. I think. You're welcome, Seth. I think we have gotten to the end of the questions today. Woohoo. What a session. I think this is our longest one to date. We are 2 hours on the dot. So that's awesome. I feel like sometimes I get a little overwhelmed in the middle when I'm 5 questions behind or 7 questions behind. So thanks, everybody. If you're still here, thanks for watching the whole time. Like Sparrow, you've been here the whole time. Thank you. Antonio, thank you for being here the whole time. And let's see. It was Rhodesy. If Rhodesy's still here, I promise I will get to your questions. Promise. I will take a look at everything in an email, and we'll dive into it next time. Nancy, well, good news, Nancy. Well, hello, first of all, and good news, you can always rewatch the beginning. And then just a reminder for everybody who's still here. Richard, it was great to see you. I'm sorry I didn't get to say hi earlier, but thanks. I saw your very kind compliment earlier, so thank you for that, Richard. And Bunny, you've been here the whole time as well. Thank you. Thank you for staying and having such great questions. So just a reminder for everybody that's here, you can always submit a video for us to take a look at. And today we talked about performance and even composition videos or transcription, any of that stuff I'm happy to take a look at. And our next session of these will be in 2 weeks from today, whatever date that happens to be. 2 weeks from today, they're always at 10 o'clock Mountain Time in the US. And I try to have the landing page for these built like about 24 hours in advance, maybe a little more sometimes. But like, for example, Nancy, if you're ever unsure about what time they happen and you really want to catch the beginning of the class, you can check out the landing page and it will tell you in your time zone what time they're going to start. So, yeah. All right. David, hey. Awesome. I would love to hear, David. I would love to hear you playing the first ballade. That would be so much fun. I haven't gotten a chance to work on that with a student in 5 or 6 years, pre-COVID. It's such a fabulous piece. So awesome. Well, everybody, thanks again for being here. Thanks again for such a wonderful class. Thanks again, Antonio, for a great submission that kicked us off today and got us going. And keep up the good work. And it was great seeing everybody else that tunes in regularly. I always have a fun time saying hi to all of you. And I hope that you enjoy these Wednesdays as much as I do. So thanks for being here. Practice smarter, not harder. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Wednesday, 2 weeks from today. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.